Hey everybody, it's Matt here, and today we're starting a series that I've been trying to get off the ground for months, so I am so happy that we get to start it today. It's called Game or Pass, where I take a look at games that are on different streaming services, or specifically just different video game services, a bit like Netflix, of course, but not all of them have streaming. Things like PlayStation Now, or whatever it's been turned into now, Nintendo Switch Online, and Game Pass, and also even the Epic Game Store giving away their free games per week, and Amazon doing the same. Yes, Amazon Prime has a game service where they do just that every month, to be fair, for Prime. But the point is that we'll be talking about one game per video and reviewing it and seeing if you should game or pass. And today I'm actually talking about Mighty Goose, a game that sadly recently was taken off Xbox Game Pass, but is extremely cheap. And there are reasons as to why it's cheap in price, but I will say that just from the get-go, it doesn't mean that it is cheap in quality. So let's get to the review right now. So Mighty Goose has you taking on the role of a goose who is a bounty hunter. So immediately getting Metroid vibes. However, instead of playing like Metroid, it actually plays a bit more like Contra. Although when you look at the actual setup for when you're going from area to area, it does resemble a little bit of a mix between Metroid and Star Fox. Although, while you're not necessarily taking over like a ship or anything like that to do an up-down kind of vertical perspective, you do have a side-to-side perspective at times where you can take over either a tank or a spaceship. And this is a very interesting and unique game. I didn't think that I'd like this as much as I did, especially hearing the name Mighty Goose and seeing some of this artwork. I was like, okay, maybe, but this game is absolutely absurd. So first things first, it actually is pretty difficult. Now, you can get used to it, to be fair, but you really have to get into a zone, and the game rewards you for getting into that zone while playing as the goose. And the reward that it gives you is that time slows down a bit and you can hear it slow down, and then there's a goose on screen. A giant goose. So the second I saw the goose, I immediately fell in love with this game. So the game has you take on the goose, and he's going on different missions to try to save different people that he's friends with, that he works with, and also to generally try to fight the Void King. So this king, as you can see ominously in different cutscenes, there's no voiceover work, but still I do think that the sprite work is gorgeous, especially on my Xbox One, and I never would have thought that the game actually would look good on the Xbox One. Nothing against the developers, nothing against the game itself, it's just, this is a game that I would think, oh, I'll play it on the Switch. But honestly, playing it on the Xbox One, it felt like it just was meant to be on it. It didn't feel like it was just some, older game. Obviously, it was made rather recently, but it didn't feel like it was like an older upscaled game at all that was, made for either something like the Switch or made for like the NES or SNES. No, and by the way, obviously, I am a fan. I grew up with the SNES, but this is a game that even on the Xbox, although I do have a base Xbox One, which by the way, does work well on that as well. No stuttering or anything like that. I was able to record the footage directly through it, the footage that we're seeing right now in this video, and it just looks amazing. And when I talked about the difficulty before, again, you can get used to it. There's hordes of enemies coming at you. There's also different power-ups that you can get throughout the level, and also some that your partners can give to you. I'll get to that in just a little bit. But when it comes to the bosses are very, very difficult. But thankfully though, the game does help you out. When you do die, it does start you from right before the boss, although that could be a problem because very much like in a game like R-Type, in a shoot 'em up like that, when you don't have your power-ups, it hurts. So you don't start with any power-ups if you die during the middle of a boss fight. But it still is beatable. It might take you a few tries. Some of these bosses took me about 5-8 tries, but you can get the hang of it. You can beat the boss. Again though, I mentioned the quote-unquote zone because you really have to hone in, you really have to focus on this, because some of these bosses, as you can tell just by seeing it, are intricate. They don't just have one death cycle, you actually have to go through a second one sometimes, and so these bosses are intense. However, though, the game does help you out and does compensate because the game isn't that long. That's why I definitely enjoyed it through Game Pass, because when you look at its price compared to how long it is, which is only about 2.5 hours, you can beat the game relatively quickly in one sitting. I would recommend, though, beating it with a friend, just laughing, drinking if you drink, and just kind of really getting some chips out, because this is such a fun experience that I enjoyed it alone. I did, but I do think that I immediately want to buy it on Switch and take it over and play it at a friend's house, because this game is just hilarious. Now, I talked about the partners before, so you can unlock some partners through different missions that where you're sent to save them. Even if it's not a partner at first, someone that you know or the character knows in game, you can get to know them and then just end up having them do different things for you during a level. And it's interesting because you have to pick the partner before you go into the level, but if for some reason maybe the level it's not really doing it for you, you're like, no, this partner, they're giving me items that don't really fit my playstyle, you can easily just go out of the level, get the partner back, and then jump back into the level. Not immediately where you were, but you can still do it, and it's not as if these levels are so intensely long that you're feeling like, 30 minutes went down the drain just by trying to play with a different partner in a certain level. Depending on the partner, personally, I enjoy Vark. The reason why is because he just gives me a lot of power-ups that I rather enjoy, like the machine gun. That's his specific one, although there are some other ones that you can unlock again throughout the game that might be better for you. But for me personally, machine gun, big fan. Now, it's not as if that's all you're limited to. You can also get through different things that you do in the game, you can actually get other kinds of power-ups, but what they do to make sure that you're not just overloading yourself on all the different power-ups, you actually have a set amount of points that you can only use, so you do have to choose wisely. And you also can even use some other power-ups as well. So some are for your weapons, some are just personal power-ups, but allow you to even summon enemies if you want. And so depending on what level you've been through, you can have a mastery of the undead, and you can actually summon some skeletons if you wanted to. Initially, though, you have a quack that doesn't really do anything according to the description. It's just fun to do, which it was. But either way, though, when it comes to the energy of this game, there is so much going on. At times I felt lost, but in a good way. That I had to pause, recenter myself, and just kind of get back into it. And if you manage to beat the final boss, which is difficult, the king is rather difficult. There's a few different animations, death cycles you have to go through to finally really beat him. There is actually post-game content, which I think is really cool. I did not expect that. I thought after about 2 hours, I was like, well, I guess I beat it. I mean, it's fun, but that is what it is, right? No, post-game content where you get to fight a boss that's even more difficult than the king was in certain respects. But it was just so much fun. It was so silly. This game was made with tongue firmly planted in cheek. And I am just such a huge fan of it, such a huge fan of the comedy in it. And there's a new game plus that I'm not going to spoil, because it's actually plot related somehow. But the way they do the new game plus is that you do not at all lose your save data. You don't lose any of the weapons that you've already had, technically. You can still play New Game Plus while going back to the original game. And that is amazing, because that's the one thing about New Game Plus that I always feel weird about, is that you're discarding everything you just did just to have this new, harder experience, which is nice, but I've already beaten the game. It's not really my thing. And to be fair, it's not that I fell in love with the New Game Plus or anything, but the concept of it, the idea of not losing everything that you just had and being able to jump back into the original if you want to, huge fan of it. I highly recommend it if you're a fan of the game, or from what you've seen so far, definitely try out the New Game Plus. It is difficult in a fun way, and definitely just try out this game in general. I mean, if you're not a fan of games like this, again, I would still highly suggest trying it out. It is so much fun. It is just absurd in the best way possible. And the dialogue is also fun too, of course, but I think for me it was just how much it surprised me. And I hope looking at this footage it does for you as well. If you've heard about it in the past, didn't know if you should get into it, I highly suggest. So in this case, Game or Pass, we're going to go with game. And a few more things that I want to mention as well before wrapping up are the really good accessibility options if you want to make the game either easier or more difficult. Also, the fact that you have this mighty mode where you can actually go essentially Super Saiyan Goose, which I'm a huge fan of, and it's definitely needed during latter parts of the game. The ability that I found very interesting, I didn't actually use until later on in the game, I didn't even know it was an option, to actually end up using coins that you get in-game. So in-game currency, no currency that you have to put any real-world money into, that you can actually buy certain upgrades while you're playing a level, which are really fun if you want to just kind of summon a tank and just go completely absurd. And by the way, speaking of some references that we talked about before, look at this Mega Man X reference right here, just kind of being in this giant mech, although it also kind of looks a little bit like Gurren Lagann, but you can just kind of punch around as this mech. So this is a game that is just, at its core, fun. So thank you all so much for watching. If you like the video, please remember to like and subscribe. And if you don't like the video, you can still like and subscribe either way. I won't judge you. Thank you all so much for watching as always. Love you all. Take care. And tune in next time for something completely different. Alright everybody, so I'll see ya.